I never imagined that the day I uncovered the truth would become the turning point of my entire life. The morning was deceptively ordinary, a pale winter sunrise casting long shadows over our quiet suburban street. I had woken up to the sound of the kettle whistling in the kitchen, the smell of stale coffee mingling with the remnants of a once comfortable home. But that day, something was amiss. For weeks, I'd felt a gnawing sense of betrayal. A few stray texts on her phone, hushed whispers in the dead of night, and an unshakable intuition had slowly built into a grim realization. My wife, Miranda, whom I had believed to be my partner in life, was playing a dangerous game. And like a seasoned detective piecing together evidence, I had collected every shred of proof with cold, calculated precision. I still remember the moment of confirmation. It was an otherwise unremarkable evening when I discovered her secret. I had returned from work earlier than usual, a rare occurrence that now seemed like fate. The house was silent except for the low hum of the television in the living room. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding not from fear, but from a simmering, controlled fury. As I entered the room, I saw her, the woman I had trusted, the woman who had vowed to be honest, and another man, entangled in a sordid embrace that betrayed every promise we had made. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions. I felt a surge of cold, unrelenting clarity. Every lie, every whispered denial, and every ruse now fell into place like the pieces of a well-rehearsed con. Miranda's eyes met mine for a brief, desperate moment, a silent apology that said everything and nothing at all. But I wasn't interested in her remorse, not yet. I was interested in the truth and in the plans that would follow. Miranda had always been a force of nature, vibrant, cunning, and unapologetically bold in her own way. But beneath that dazzling exterior lay a deceitful streak, a disregard for honesty that I had once mistaken for passion. Her casual, almost cavalier attitude about the affair, the way she dismissed my silent accusation with a scoff and a roll of her eyes, spoke volumes. It was clear she saw our marriage as nothing more than a stepping stone to a life filled with excitement and convenience, rather than commitment. In the days that followed, I let the shock settle like a quiet snowfall, slow, deliberate, and inevitable. I spent countless nights poring over messages, tracking down every whispered secret and every clandestine meeting she had orchestrated behind my back. The evidence was irrefutable. Yet, I decided to keep it all to myself. I wanted to savor every moment of this bitter revelation, to plan my revenge with the precision of a master strategist. I began to transform. The once complacent husband became a man driven by purpose. I studied her habits, noted every detail of her daily routine, and mapped out the intricate web of lies she had spun. I realized that her betrayal wasn't just an act of infidelity, it was a calculated choice, a betrayal of every sacred promise we had shared. And so, I resolved to return the favor, but in a manner that was as cold and ruthless as the truth that had shattered our lives. One evening, I sat alone in my study, the soft glow of the desk lamp casting a solitary halo around my notes. I meticulously drafted a plan that would not only expose her duplicity but also remind her that betrayal comes at a steep price. I wasn't going to confront her in a fit of passion or a moment of emotional vulnerability. No, my approach would be deliberate, methodical, and utterly devoid of mercy. I envisioned a series of events that would leave her reeling, forcing her to confront the consequences of her actions in the most unyielding manner. As I formulated my strategy, memories of our happier times, a time when I believed in the purity of our love, mixed bitterly with the sting of her deceit. The man I once was slowly being replaced by someone sharper, more resolute. In that moment, I felt a surge of confidence. I was no longer the naive husband who had once believed in fairy tales. I was now the architect of my own retribution, and every detail of her double life was a building block in the fortress of my vengeance. But I knew that revenge was only the beginning. Miranda's smug defiance, her blatant disregard for our vows, hinted at deeper layers yet to be revealed. There were secrets in her past that I had only begun to scratch the surface of, secrets that, if uncovered, would shatter the very foundation of the life she had built on lies. And as I sat there, a slow smile forming on my lips, I realized that the final twist in this twisted saga was still waiting in the wings, a surprise that would leave her begging for redemption before the inevitable reckoning. The stage was set, and I was ready to take the first step towards reclaiming not just my dignity, but also a truth that had been hidden in plain sight for far too long. Over the next few days, I immersed myself in the meticulous execution of my plan. I became a ghost in my own home, my every move shadowed by a cold determination. I watched as Miranda carried on with her life, completely oblivious to the storm brewing behind her back. Each smile, Every nonchalant comment she tossed out like confetti at a party now served as fuel for the fire of retribution burning inside me. I started by securing the damning evidence I had amassed. Every text message, every cryptic voicemail, every blurred photograph that captured her illicit rendezvous. These became my arsenal. I transferred all of it onto a secure drive and backed it up in multiple hidden locations. My objective was twofold: to guarantee that no shred of her betrayal could ever be forgotten, and to prepare for the moment when her carefully constructed facade would crumble. The next phase of my strategy was more elaborate. I knew that simply exposing her misdeeds wouldn't be enough. I needed to orchestrate a scenario that would force her to confront not just her infidelity, but the depth of her deceit. I arranged a series of meetings with influential figures from her professional world, people who had once praised her charm and competence, unaware of the rot beneath. One by one, they were shown the truth, that the dazzling woman they admired was nothing more than a conniving charlatan. Their reactions varied from disbelief to simmering anger, each adding another layer of isolation to her impending downfall. But I was not content with merely tarnishing her reputation. I intended to hit her where it hurt the most, her pride. I organized an exclusive gathering at an upscale venue, inviting an eclectic mix of acquaintances, colleagues, and mutual friends. It was a calculated move designed to trap her in a social web of her own making. The invitations were sent with a hint of mystery, ensuring that the event would have an air of exclusivity that she couldn't resist. Little did she know that the evening was destined to become the stage for her most humiliating spectacle yet. On the night of the event, the venue hummed with a buzz of anticipation. The guests mingled under soft lighting, their conversations filled with gentle laughter and casual camaraderie. Miranda arrived with her usual confident stride, dressed impeccably, her eyes glittering with misplaced arrogance. She moved through the room like she owned it, completely unaware of the trap laid out before her. I watched from a discreet corner, every detail of her interaction, every dismissive gesture, logged in my mind with a mix of satisfaction and grim determination. Then came the moment of reckoning. In the midst of the chatter, I stepped forward, a figure of calm authority. I requested the attention of everyone present, and with a steady voice that resonated with unyielding conviction, I began to recount the story of betrayal, a story in which Miranda was the central antagonist. As I detailed the extent of her deception, the room fell into a heavy, stunned silence. Faces turned pale, whispers grew into murmurs of disbelief, and the once adoring crowd now looked at her with a mixture of scorn and pity. Miranda's reaction was immediate and explosive. Her eyes flashed with anger as she tried to interject, her voice trembling between indignation and panic. She attempted to deflect, accusing me of fabricating tales and twisting the truth. But the evidence was irrefutable, each piece presented like a bullet in a case that could no longer be denied. She continued to lie, to throw around rude retorts, insisting that nothing was as it seemed. Yet as the undeniable reality settled over the gathering, even her most vehement denials began to crumble. In that charged moment, something shifted. Amid the chaos of shattered illusions, I revealed a final, devastating twist, one that would forever alter the course of her life. Unbeknownst to her, I had discovered her darkest secret, something she had meticulously hidden away from the world. It was a secret that not only implicated her in infidelity, but in a far graver transgression, a betrayal that went beyond personal disloyalty and into the realm of criminal behavior. The revelation hit the room like a sledgehammer, silencing the whispers and drawing gasps of shock from everyone present. I watched as her once confident demeanor disintegrated into panic and regret. In that instant, her pride, which had been both her shield and her downfall, became her undoing. The guests, now armed with the truth, began to close in around her, their expressions a mix of disappointment and vindication. Miranda, the bitch who had brazenly flaunted her deceit, now found herself exposed, vulnerable, and utterly isolated. As I stepped back to observe the chaos unfolding, I felt no remorse, only a steely satisfaction. My plan had worked perfectly, the meticulous execution leaving no room for her to escape the consequences of her actions. The night had transformed from a celebration into a reckoning, and I knew that this was only the beginning. For in the labyrinth of lies and betrayal, there were more layers yet to be uncovered, each one promising to take her further down the path of ruin. In the days that followed that fateful evening, the fallout of the party rippled through every corner of our once shared world. I retreated into a self-imposed isolation, not out of guilt but to recalibrate and ensure that the next phase of my plan unfolded with ruthless precision. The public shaming had been just the opening act, a prelude to the final, decisive blow that would leave Miranda utterly broken. I spent long hours in the quiet of our now empty home, poring over new evidence that had come to light in the wake of that dramatic revelation. It turned out that Miranda's treachery ran far deeper than I had ever suspected. Not only had she betrayed me on a personal level, but her network of deceit extended into a labyrinth of fraud and corruption that implicated several influential figures. Every new piece of information I uncovered painted a darker, more intricate picture of a woman who had mastered the art of manipulation. As I sifted through confidential documents and obscure financial records, I discovered that Miranda had been siphoning funds from joint accounts and orchestrating elaborate schemes to defraud unsuspecting associates. It wasn't just infidelity, it was calculated criminality executed with a chilling nonchalance. I had always known her to be audacious, but this revelation elevated her transgressions to a whole new echelon of betrayal. The more I uncovered, the more my resolve hardened. This was no longer merely about revenge, it was about justice, a reckoning for the lies that had tainted every aspect of our lives. One brisk morning, I arranged a meeting with an old acquaintance from my past, a retired detective whose expertise in financial crimes was legendary. In the dim light of a secluded cafe, I laid out the evidence before him. With each document and whispered confession recounted, his eyes grew wider, and his expression shifted from skepticism to grim determination. He confirmed what I had suspected. Miranda's actions were not only criminal but far-reaching enough to entangle powerful people who had protected her, either knowingly or through complicity. Armed with this new perspective, I recalibrated my next move. I knew that, once again, Miranda would try to spin her way out of the situation with her characteristic blend of lies and arrogance. But this time, I wasn't merely exposing her for personal betrayal, I was dismantling an entire empire built on deceit. I contacted a journalist known for his investigative rigor and ethical approach to exposing corruption. In hushed tones over a secure line, I shared the evidence, ensuring that his curiosity would be piqued enough to pursue the story further, but without revealing too many details prematurely. The seeds of a media storm were now firmly planted. Yet, amidst all this calculated maneuvering, there remained a nagging detail, a last piece of the puzzle that I had yet to reveal. Miranda, in her desperate attempts to cling to control, had tried to negotiate with me, sending frantic messages, desperate pleas, and even false promises of reform. Every time, I allowed her a fleeting moment of hope, only to extinguish it with a gesture that left her more exposed and humiliated than before. I wanted her to realize that her manipulations were not only transparent but pitifully childish compared to the gravity of her crimes. Her first act of desperation came in the form of a letter, a carefully penned apology laced with insincere regret and a litany of excuses. I read her words aloud in the quiet solitude of our study, each sentence a reminder of the person I once loved, now reduced to a scheming, self-serving imposter. I had already seen the smug, dismissive expression on her face during our encounter at the party, and now her words, dripping with falseness, only deepened my resolve. I decided to use her own words against her, weaving them into the narrative I was crafting for the world to see. Meanwhile, whispers began to circulate in the corridors of power and among our mutual acquaintances. The fallout from that party had sent shockwaves through our social circle, and many were now questioning the true nature of Miranda's affairs. Some of her closest allies began to distance themselves, unwilling to be associated with the scandal that was unfolding. The dominoes were falling perfectly into place, a meticulously orchestrated chain reaction of consequences that left her increasingly isolated. And then, just as I was preparing to release the full extent of the evidence to the public, another twist emerged. An unexpected phone call shattered the calm of one rainy afternoon. It was from someone I hadn't heard from in years, a former colleague from a previous life in corporate security, now a freelance investigator with a penchant for digging up skeletons. He had intercepted a communication that suggested Miranda might have been blackmailed by a shadowy figure, someone who had a vested interest in keeping her secrets hidden. This revelation added another layer to the already convoluted tapestry of her double life. Had she been playing all sides, or was she a pawn in a much larger, more sinister game? The question sent a chill down my spine, but it also reinvigorated my determination. I wasn't just avenging a personal betrayal. I was unraveling an entire network of corruption and manipulation. As I prepared to confront this new development, I couldn't help but marvel at the irony. Miranda had always portrayed herself as the master puppeteer, the one in control of every string. Yet, here I was, pulling those very strings and watching as the intricate web she had spun began to collapse. I could almost see the look of shock on her face, that final moment when she would be forced to admit her guilt, not just in our marriage, but in the grander scheme of the crime she had committed. The stage was set for the next act of this unfolding drama. My resolve was unwavering, and my confidence unshakable. With every new piece of evidence, every connection unearthed, I felt a surge of vindication. The person who had once been blinded by love and trust was now replaced by a man who saw clearly. The man who would deliver justice with cold, unyielding precision. The final confrontation loomed on the horizon, and with it, the promise of a reckoning that would leave Miranda with nothing left to hide. In the wake of that revelatory phone call, the world around me seemed to morph into a stage for the ultimate showdown. A confrontation where every secret, every lie, and every ounce of betrayal would be exposed for what it truly was. I knew that the stakes had escalated far beyond a simple marital debacle. I was now tangled in a web of organized deceit that threatened to envelop not only Miranda, but a whole network of influential conspirators. The intercepted communication had hinted at a shadowy figure whose intent was to keep Miranda's darkest secrets under lock and key. This mysterious puppet master, operating from the murky fringes of the criminal underworld, had apparently discovered her involvement in a much larger scheme, a conspiracy that reached into the corridors of power. It was a revelation that turned my personal vendetta into a battle against an unseen enemy, one whose machinations could wreak havoc on countless lives. Yet, rather than intimidate me, it ignited a new fire of determination. I would not allow these clandestine forces to succeed, and I would use every tool at my disposal to bring Miranda, and those protecting her, down. I began by retracing the digital footprints she had so carelessly left behind. Every encrypted message, every suspicious transaction, every contact with dubious figures was now re-examined under my steely gaze. With the help of my trusted ally from corporate security, who had become an invaluable freelance investigator, I dug deeper into the labyrinth of financial records and covert communications. The more I uncovered, the more it became evident that Miranda had been manipulated, or perhaps willingly complicit, in a broader scheme of extortion and fraud. She had played multiple sides like a seasoned con artist, all the while wearing the mask of innocence in public. And now, the mask was starting to crack. It wasn't long before I traced the digital signal back to its source, a nondescript server in an offshore location that served as the nerve center for a network of illegal operations. The information I recovered pointed to a series of transactions involving large sums of money that had been funneled through shell companies, all of which bore Miranda's digital fingerprints. The implications were staggering. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was a key player in a criminal enterprise that could ruin lives, including her own. This wasn't a case of a lonely wife seeking thrill. It was calculated, cold-blooded criminality executed with meticulous precision. Armed with this new evidence, I decided to take my revenge to an even more personal level. I arranged a clandestine meeting with a former associate of Miranda's, someone who had once enjoyed her favor in the world of high finance, but had since fallen out of her good graces. Over a quiet dinner in a dimly lit restaurant on the outskirts of the city, I coaxed him into divulging details about her secret operations. His eyes darted around nervously as he confessed that Miranda had not only manipulated business deals for her own gain but had also been involved in laundering money for the shadowy figure who now sought to control her fate. His words painted a picture of a woman who had, over time, become entangled in deals too dangerous for her to extricate herself from, a spider ensnared in her own web. Each revelation served as a stepping stone toward the final act of my retribution. I realized that if I could expose this entire network to the world, not only would Miranda be forced to confront the ruinous consequences of her actions, but the powerful individuals who had sheltered her would also face their reckoning. It was a risky gambit, but one that promised to dismantle the empire of deceit piece by piece. I began crafting a dossier that was as comprehensive as it was damning. With every page, I laid out the timeline of her betrayals, the transactions that reeked of corruption, and the trail that linked her to the clandestine figure orchestrating the extortion. I reached out to contacts in law enforcement, trusted officers who had seen their share of white-collar crime, and arranged discreet meetings to pass along the evidence. The initial responses were measured and cautious, yet I could sense that the ripple effects of what I was unveiling would soon become an unstoppable tide. Back at home, Every room in our once shared residence now bore the weight of memories of a life built on trust that had slowly decayed into a fortress of secrets and lies. I moved through those rooms like a man reclaiming what was rightfully his. The cold precision that had once been suppressed by my trust in Miranda was now my constant companion. I immersed myself in the legal and financial intricacies of her dealings, confident that with each new document I uncovered, I was one step closer to not only vindicating myself but also exacting a revenge that was as surgical as it was final. Yet, even as I relished the gradual collapse of her world, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still one more twist in this narrative, a final card that Miranda had hidden, perhaps out of sheer desperation or a last-ditch effort to regain control. The thought of it fueled my resolve further. I would uncover every hidden file, every coded message, and every whispered secret until there was nothing left for her to hide. Her arrogance, which had once blinded me to her duplicity, would be her ultimate undoing. As I closed another chapter of my investigation, I knew that the coming days would be a test of my unwavering focus and determination. The stage was set for the most critical phase of this relentless campaign, a confrontation that would not only expose her criminality but also deliver a final, decisive blow. The game was no longer about personal betrayal alone. It was about justice, about the retribution of every life that had been touched by her treachery, and about proving that no amount of deceit could stand against the cold, unyielding truth. In the weeks that followed my clandestine meetings and the public spectacle that had shattered Miranda's carefully constructed facade, I retreated deeper into a world of secrets and revelations. Each day brought fresh evidence and subtle clues that, when pieced together, painted an even darker picture of her transgressions. I realized that the true extent of her deceit was something far more sinister than I had ever imagined, a labyrinthine network of betrayal that had infiltrated every corner of our lives. Late one night, while the city slept beneath a cold drizzle, I sat alone in the study with only the soft hum of the rain for company. The documents spread out before me were a chaotic mosaic of financial records, encrypted emails, and confidential witness statements. It was in this dim solitude that I discovered a file marked simply Project Nemesis. Its contents sent a shiver down my spine. Inside were details that implicated not only Miranda and her multi-layered fraud but also hinted at an elaborate scheme that went back years, a plan that involved high-stakes money laundering, a secret consortium of crooked businessmen, and even a few political figures whose names now dripped with suspicion. My pulse quickened as I read through the file. Project Nemesis was not merely an offshoot of Miranda's personal ambitions, it was the cornerstone of an entire criminal enterprise. I began to piece together the narrative. Miranda had entered the shadowy alliance willingly, seduced by promises of wealth and influence, but she had also learned to manipulate and play the role of the puppet master. Every lie, every furtive glance, every evasive conversation had led to this moment, her deep, irrevocable descent into a realm where loyalty was a currency traded for power. The more I uncovered, the more I knew that my next move had to be executed with impeccable precision. With Project Nemesis in my possession, I had the ammunition needed to dismantle not only her reputation but the very empire of corruption she had helped build. But there was a personal element that still nagged at me, a final confrontation that would force Miranda to face the full weight of her actions. I resolved that the ultimate reckoning would not be a simple legal or financial downfall. It would be a moment of raw, personal justice. I arranged a secret meeting with an undercover operative who specialized in corporate espionage, a man whose discreet methods and unyielding resolve were well known in the circles of white-collar justice. Over a series of hushed phone calls and encrypted messages, I shared the contents of Project Nemesis. The operative confirmed that the evidence was as damning as it was explosive. He agreed to help me orchestrate a sting operation that would expose the network in a single, devastating blow. Our plan was to leak the documents to a coalition of investigative journalists and law enforcement agencies, ensuring that Miranda and her sinister collaborators would have nowhere to hide. Yet, even as I prepared for the impending storm, a nagging thought persisted. What if Miranda had a counterplan of her own? Her reputation for deception was as legendary as her capacity to lie and manipulate. I decided to dig deeper into her personal communications, combing through the digital breadcrumbs she had left behind in her desperate bid to cover her tracks. It was during one of these deep dives that I uncovered an encrypted chat log between Miranda and an unknown individual. The conversation was laced with urgency and hints of a secret deal, one that suggested she had been negotiating a way out of the fallout by collaborating with someone in the very heart of the consortium. A cold realization washed over me. Miranda had always prided herself on being in control, the one who dictated the pace of our relationship and her own treacherous destiny. But now, it appeared that she was on the brink of a collapse of her own making, entangled in a double-cross that she couldn't untangle. With the evidence mounting, I began to suspect that her collusion wasn't merely about survival. It was a calculated maneuver to leverage the situation for her own benefit, even if it meant betraying her partners in crime. Armed with this new insight, I set up a meeting in a discreet location, an abandoned warehouse far from prying eyes. I arranged to confront her face-to-face, not with the fury of a betrayed husband, but with the icy confidence of a man who had been planning his own resurrection from the ashes of deceit. When Miranda arrived, her usual haughty demeanor had faded, replaced by a wary tension that belied her habitual arrogance. For a brief moment, I saw the glimmer of fear in her eyes, a sign that she knew, deep down, that she was teetering on the edge of ruin. Standing in the vast, echoing space of the warehouse, I presented her with the undeniable truth of Project Nemesis and the additional evidence of her secret negotiations. My voice, calm and unyielding, recounted every detail of her betrayal, the personal, the financial, and the criminal. I watched as the layers of her carefully cultivated persona began to crumble before my eyes. In that charged moment, she attempted to regain control with a series of feeble excuses and half-hearted denials, but I was relentless. Every lie she uttered was swiftly dismantled by the facts laid out before her. I could see that her defiance was waning, replaced by a desperate need to bargain, to mitigate the inevitable collapse of her entire world. Yet, I had no intention of offering forgiveness or a path to redemption. The betrayal was too profound, the damage too irrevocable. This was not a negotiation. It was the final chapter in a saga of lies. The shock and betrayal that she had once inflicted on me now returned in full force, and as I spoke, I could almost feel the cold grip of justice tightening around her throat. In that climactic confrontation, I knew that the final twist was near. Miranda, for all her cunning, had underestimated the resolve of a man betrayed and wronged. And as the echoes of our exchange reverberated in the hollow space, I felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. The day of reckoning had come, and there was no turning back. The cold, calculated justice I had been meticulously crafting was finally within my grasp, and with it, the promise of a future free from the shadow of her deceit. The night after the confrontation in the abandoned warehouse felt surreal, like the calm before a hurricane. I returned home with Project Nemesis clutched in my grasp and a mind brimming with calculated resolve. My pulse was steady. The adrenaline of the encounter had settled into a cold, methodical determination. I knew that Miranda's world was disintegrating, but I also understood that she might yet have one final, desperate move up her sleeve. In the quiet hours of that night, I meticulously reviewed every piece of evidence I had gathered, preparing for the final phase of my plan. The documents, the intercepted communications, and even the inconspicuous details of her secret negotiations now formed an intricate tapestry of her guilt. I had long since abandoned any desire for a simple resolution. This was far more than retribution. It was about reclaiming every ounce of dignity, about ensuring that justice was served with an unforgiving precision. But just as I was finalizing the dossier that would expose the entire criminal network behind Project Nemesis, an unexpected twist rattled the foundation of my carefully built case. I received an encrypted message on a secure line, a message that should never have been there. It was from an unknown source, written in terse, cryptic language that hinted at a deeper conspiracy. The message claimed that Miranda had been playing a double game not only with me but with forces that I had never suspected existed. According to the message, her involvement in the shadowy consortium was merely a small piece of a far larger puzzle, one that included influential figures in high society and even within law enforcement circles. I spent the next several hours combing through the digital trail, matching timestamps and cross-referencing contacts. Each new clue pointed to a hidden alliance, a network so vast that it threatened to engulf not only Miranda but also anyone who dared to uncover its secrets. It became clear that Miranda had been a pawn, and perhaps, in her own twisted way, a willing participant in an elaborate power play that reached far beyond the confines of our crumbling marriage. While the revelation staggered me, they did nothing to shake my resolve. If anything, they fanned the flames of my determination. I now had evidence not just of personal betrayal, but of systemic corruption that had been allowed to fester in the shadows. My next step was as clear as it was ruthless. I would leverage this new information to dismantle the entire network, ensuring that every hidden hand was exposed and held accountable. I reached out to the undercover operative who had assisted me earlier. In a secure meeting in a nondescript safe house, I laid out the encrypted message and the corroborating digital breadcrumbs. His eyes narrowed as he absorbed the magnitude of the discovery. "This isn't just about her," he murmured. "You've stumbled upon something much bigger." His tone was measured, but the urgency in his voice confirmed that we were now operating on an entirely different plane of danger. With his help, I planned a secondary sting, a digital trap that would not only confirm the extent of the conspiracy but also force Miranda's mysterious co-conspirators into making a fatal error. The operatives set up a secure server designed to intercept any further communications linked to the encrypted message. Over the next several days, our coordinated efforts paid off. Several high-ranking contacts, names I recognized from the inner circles of finance and politics, began inadvertently transmitting data that tied them directly to the network. The chain of evidence grew, layer by damning layer. Amid this flurry of revelations, a twist that I hadn't foreseen emerged. One of the intercepted messages mentioned a meeting scheduled for the following week, a rendezvous that was supposed to solidify the alliance between Miranda's inner circle and the higher echelons of power. I immediately saw an opportunity. If I could attend this meeting, I could expose not only Miranda but the entire cabal in one fell swoop. The stakes were enormous, but so was my resolve. As I prepared to infiltrate the meeting, I couldn't help but reflect on the bitter irony. The very woman who had once laughed at my trust, who had manipulated our life with her deceitful charm, was now at the center of a conspiracy that could topple entire institutions. Her arrogance had blinded her to the risks, and it was precisely that overconfidence that I intended to exploit. I donned a disguise and assumed a new identity, ready to blend into the shadows of a world I had only glimpsed through the remnants of her betrayal. The plan was daring, fraught with risk, but every moment of hesitation was a luxury I could no longer afford. I was stepping into a realm where the boundaries between justice and vengeance blurred, where the personal and the political intertwined in dangerous, irreversible ways. Every step I took was measured, every decision weighed against the potential fallout. This was no longer just a man avenging a broken trust. It was a calculated strike against an empire built on lies. As I set off towards the meeting location, a discreet high-rise in the heart of the city, I felt the chill of the night air mingle with the resolve in my veins. The final phase of my campaign was about to unfold, and with it, the moment of reckoning for Miranda and everyone who had shielded her. In that moment, I wasn't just a betrayed husband. I was the harbinger of a new order, one in which truth, no matter how deeply buried, would be unmasked with relentless, cold-blooded precision. The night of the clandestine meeting arrived with an eerie calm. Cloaked in my assumed identity and a carefully crafted disguise, I blended into the throng of guests gathered in the opulent high-rise lobby. Every step I took echoed with the weight of impending reckoning, a silent promise that tonight, the hidden alliances would come crashing down. I had spent days studying the guest list, learning the subtle cues and mannerisms of those who moved in this shadowy world. Each person here carried an air of quiet menace, their eyes betraying the knowledge of secrets too dangerous for public light. As I ascended in a sleek elevator, I reviewed every intercepted message, every piece of damning evidence stored securely on my encrypted drive. The convergence of these threads had led me to this single moment, a final gambit designed to pull the rug out from beneath Miranda and her powerful collaborators. Entering the private lounge, I felt the pulse of tension in the air. A long mahogany table dominated the space, surrounded by figures in tailored suits, their hushed conversations laced with both suspicion and a sense of entitlement. At the head of the table sat a man whose icy gaze swept over the room, a man who, from the rumors, was the linchpin in this vast network of corruption. Across from him, Miranda stood out even in her carefully muted elegance, her confident smile now a brittle mask for the turmoil underneath. I took a moment to blend in, positioning myself near the refreshment table and quietly observing every detail. My heart remained steady. The thrill of impending justice was tempered by a cold resolve. Soon enough, the meeting began in earnest. The conversation was laced with double entendres and veiled threats. Each participant seemed to measure their words with the precision of a seasoned negotiator, aware that a single misstep could unravel the fragile web of their illicit dealings. As the discussion turned to the logistics of their next move, a significant transaction that would cement their control over several influential sectors, I knew it was time to act. I discreetly activated the secure transmitter hidden in my cufflink. With practiced precision, I began leaking real-time data to both the undercover operative and the investigative journalist who had become my unlikely allies. The plan was simple: expose every conversation, every incriminating detail, live. The subsequent silence was palpable as digital alerts began pouring in from my team. Before the conspirators could react, a cacophony of alarms shattered the meeting's tense atmosphere. In that split second, pandemonium erupted. Men scrambled, their faces a mix of shock and rage, as law enforcement officers, previously tipped off, stormed into the room. I melted into the chaos, slipping into the shadows with a satisfaction that was almost surgical in its precision. In the confusion, Miranda's eyes locked onto mine for a fleeting second, a look that held a tumult of emotions: betrayal, desperation, and a dawning realization that she was not in control anymore. It was as if time itself had paused, the air thick with unspoken accusations and the finality of her inevitable downfall. For that moment, I saw the ghost of the woman I once loved, twisted now by her own hubris and deceit. As the authorities secured the room and began arresting the key figures of the cabal, I made my silent exit. My mission was clear: dismantle the network piece by piece and ensure that every hidden transgression would face the light of day. The data streaming in confirmed that my sting had been a success, enough to trigger investigations that would echo through the corridors of power for months to come. Walking away from the high-rise that night, I felt an overwhelming mix of vindication and melancholy. The victory was bittersweet. Miranda's betrayal had ignited a firestorm far beyond our private lives, a conflagration of corruption that would now burn out its many layers. Yet, as the cool night air enveloped me, I knew this was only a prelude. The unraveling of her empire was in motion, and the final, devastating chapter was still waiting in the wings. In the aftermath of that chaotic night at the high-rise, the city buzzed with whispers of corruption and betrayal. Headlines began to surface, names of powerful men brought down by the relentless pursuit of truth, and at the center of it all, Miranda. The domino effect of my carefully orchestrated sting was now in full swing, and the world was beginning to see the dark underbelly of the empire she had helped build. For a while, I observed from a distance as the authorities worked tirelessly to unravel the intricate network of lies. Court summons, media interviews, and frantic phone calls painted a picture of an unraveling web. Yet, amid the chaos, something unexpected happened. Miranda, desperate and broken, began to crawl back into my life. Her calls, once laced with scorn and arrogance, now carried a pleading tone, a mixture of regret and fear. She insisted that she was ready to change, that the tides of fate had finally caught up with her. I listened to her disjointed apologies with a detached calm. The woman who had once dismissed my pain with a sneer was now reduced to pleading for another chance, a chance to escape the relentless judgment of a public outcry. In those moments, I wondered if I could ever truly let go of the past, if the man who had once loved her could now find compassion in the ashes of his betrayal. But compassion, I had long learned, was a luxury that betrayal did not afford. Still, there was one final piece to the puzzle, a twist that even I had not foreseen. It began with a single, innocuous email that arrived on a quiet morning, a message that appeared to be from Miranda. Unlike her frantic pleas, this email was measured, almost eerily calm. She wrote of an impending danger, a secret too explosive to reveal in public, and a personal confession that would alter everything. Intrigued, I read on, my heart pounding not from the warmth of reconciliation, but from the anticipation of one final twist in our twisted tale. Miranda revealed that her betrayal, the entire labyrinth of deceit and criminality, had been manipulated by a far more powerful force, a figure from her past who had been silently controlling the strings. This mysterious mastermind, she claimed, had been the true architect behind Project Nemesis. In an almost remorseful tone, she admitted that her calculated moves were not entirely of her own volition. Instead, she had been coerced into playing a dangerous game, forced to dance to the tune of someone who remained shrouded in mystery. The revelation was staggering, a confession that threatened to upend everything I thought I knew about her, and, more importantly, about the network we had dismantled. A chill ran down my spine as I reread her words. Had I been a pawn in an even larger game? Was my meticulously crafted revenge simply a stepping stone in a grander scheme orchestrated by an unseen puppeteer? The more I pondered her confession, the more I realized that this new twist could either be her desperate bid to salvage a shred of dignity or a genuine warning of a threat that loomed larger than both of us. In the days that followed, I found myself torn between the satisfaction of exposing Miranda's treachery and the nagging uncertainty of a hidden adversary lurking in the shadows. Every time my phone buzzed with a new update from law enforcement or a tip from my undercover operative, I felt the weight of a secret that might still be unresolved. The possibility that the mastermind behind the network was still at large loomed over me like a dark cloud, a reminder that justice, however bitterly earned, was never truly complete. Miranda's subsequent attempts to reach out became more frantic. She implored for forgiveness, insisting that her confession was the beginning of a long-overdue redemption. Yet, in every conversation, there lingered a trace of fear and resignation, a silent acknowledgement that the final surprise was yet to be unveiled. I arranged a discreet meeting, one that was more of an interrogation than a reconciliation. In a quiet, nondescript cafe at the edge of town, I confronted her with the evidence, her confession, and the unsettling possibility of another, even more dangerous force at work. Her eyes, once filled with unyielding arrogance, now shimmered with tears of regret and terror. "You have to believe me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I was trapped, forced to cooperate with someone you wouldn't believe." But as she spoke, I noted every quiver, every pause, a narrative of a woman who had finally been broken by the weight of her own lies. I pressed her for details, demanding to know the identity of this mysterious figure who had held the strings. Yet, true to her nature until the very end, Miranda evaded my questions with cryptic remarks and half-truths. I left the meeting with more questions than answers. The revelation had complicated an already bitter tapestry of betrayal. Now, I was not only seeking justice for what had been done to me, but also trying to uncover the identity of the hidden puppet master, an enemy far more dangerous and elusive. As I walked away from that final encounter with Miranda, I felt the cold certainty that the battle was not yet over. The path ahead was murky, filled with the echoes of unfinished business and a promise of one last, unforeseen twist that would leave all involved reeling.